がる闇の中交し合った革命のちぎり誰にも邪魔させるわけにはいかない果実が壺に
For those of you who are watching, there is nothing to fear. Your internet connection is working fine. I am not covering my identity since the title reveals who I am, and I would only use this for private meetings. It's just that the only way I could access this video is by hacking into this review. For something like Death Note, it deserves far better treatment than giving it a regular review, since it is requested through Patreon by Heinrich Moen Nielsen, and it is a rare occurrence that I would look into a series rather than a movie. Now excuse me for a second and let me change to the camera.
Oh, this must be your first time seeing this side of me. I decided to take a new approach by sitting this way, which increases my reasoning ability by 40%. I also decided to take away any sense of emotion from this review in order to focus more on the analytics and by giving more words more believability, because as anyone who looked into a comment section would know, people would become less credible when their emotions get the best of them. So, now that I got that out of the way, allow me to get you more familiar with Death Note.
Created by writer Sugumi Oba and illustrator Takeshi Obata, Death Note began as a manga series for the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine from December of 2003 to May of 1996 with a total of 12 volumes. Just a couple of years after the manga's release, it became a huge success, and as of 2015, the collective volumes sold over 30 million copies. Of course, with any popular manga, it would later receive several adaptations that would help grow the popularity into a strong franchise, including novels, games for the Nintendo DS, a live-action TV drama, a musical, and a live-action film trilogy with a spin-off film. However, what we'll be looking at today is the anime series by Madhouse and directed by Tetsuro Araki, who would later direct other acclaimed animes like High School of the Dead, Guilty Crown, and Attack on Titan. As for what Death Note is all about, it follows the story of Light Yagami, a young and bright boy in his final years at high school who discovers a deathly notebook that belongs to a Shinigami which can kill anyone by simply writing their name while remembering their face and optionally write how they die. With this newfound notebook, he takes the alias of Kira and vows justice to the world by killing every criminal he can get his hands on and those who get in his way. While that's happening, several cops and investigators, including a mysteriously genius young man named L, pursue to capture Kira and stop him from his endless supply of killings. The rest becomes the ultimate battle of wits as Light tries to avoid getting caught while simultaneously build his new world.
It'll be a new world, free of injustice and populated by people who I've judged to be honest, kind, and hardworking. And I will become the god of this new world.
I wouldn't go and say that this is one of the household name animes that everyone knows about, like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon. But in terms of pop culture or Japanese origins, this is still considered one of the most famous ones, and the Death Note itself being a recognizable icon. But what most people would know about the Death Note itself and the strong presence of Shinigami, when you go into the story, you never expected to go into something like this.
One of the true strengths of Death Note is all the unexpected turns it would make to keep its audience on the edge of their seats while simultaneously change the direction it's going at the moment they think they know how the mood and story will go. It starts out with a supernatural thriller when Light finds the Death Note, then it changes to a battle of wits when he meets L, then it goes into a detective story when Light joins the force to catch Kira, then it becomes a crime drama, the list goes on. It clearly knows exactly when it's time to introduce a new story arc while also keeping it connected with the overall story. Sure, the tempo and the mood would switch every 4 to 5 episodes, but it still remembers the main themes and what's most important about the series, and that's Light's mission to build a new world where he can take over. Many of the themes that this series dives into include a lot of thought-provoking commentary, including what would happen if you give someone the power of death, the concept of God, and how far one would achieve his goal, even if it means the sacrifice of others. A little food for thought about what would happen if a Death Note really did fall in the hands of a real Kira. On top of that, the animation is another admirable feat this series has executed. By staying very true to the style of Takeshi Obata, these beautifully detailed designs smoothly come to life in a quality that would be considered pretty well done by feature film standards. Sure, it has its limits since it was made for television, but even as an anime, the artistry is quite impressive.
Just by the story alone, I already admire the craftsmanship of Tsugumi Ohba. He certainly knows how to form a complex and engaging story, while dancing around with some dark themes. But there is one thing that completely outshines the case of capturing Kira. But there's no doubt in my mind that it has to be the cast of characters. As Ryuk said it best,
It's just as I thought. Humans are so interesting.
And none can be more interesting than Light Yagami, the lucky boy who gets his hands on the Death Note and couldn't be a better candidate to have it. As one of the brightest kids in Japan, he completely understood what power he holds, plus he's lucky enough to have his father be the chief of police. Light has a goal to truly become a god. What seems like the ramblings of a madman can now be possible thanks to the notebook. Considering how he is a genius, he always makes sure to be on top of everyone else in order for his plans to continue and let the rise of Kira grow even bigger. This is essentially the driving force of the series, seeing all the clever ways how Light can get himself out of any situation without anyone suspecting him of being Kira while also killing all the criminals he possibly can. He could easily dominate the whole world if it weren't for his biggest obstacle in the form of L. As one of Light's fellow students said it best,
Man, these two are total opposites.
Yeah. This one looks like a sheltered genius who's been groomed for success his whole life. But the other one,
This guy must be what they call a mad genius.
L is arguably as smart or even smarter than Light in a completely different way. On the outside, he seems more of an unusual person. Antisocial, often eating snacks, always slouching, his origin is unknown, but can read anyone he meets like an open book. This is where L is so fascinating in the series. To Light as Kira, he poses as a serious threat and can have a good chance at stopping him, since he can go to greater lengths to solve the case more than any other person could be capable of. As for the more supernatural elements like the Death Note and the Gods of Death or Shinigami, they are actually underplayed so that the focus can remain on Kira. The notebook is Light's weapon of choice, and the Shinigami are just pawns to let Light advance even further. Much like most of the other characters, they can range from being more obstacles like the police force, or they can be tools that he could take advantage of. Even at that, each character, rather big or small, feel very well developed and genuinely believable. This is on top of how each character plays an important role in Light's little game whenever they are introduced. There are even some, like Matsuda, Ryuk, and Misa Amane, help give the series a lighter tone so that it's not completely serious all the time.
what was that?
Matsuda's acting stupid again.
Well, that is his specialty.
I can hear you, you know.
However, much like both Light and L, there is just one little problem that keeps it away from being entirely perfect. What makes the anime different from the manga is that Tetsuro Araki wanted to look more into the mind of Light, showing his thinking process throughout the show and his plans on how he envisioned himself as a god. A very clever way to look into the mind of a man with unlimited power, but it causes to have a little too much exposition. Especially in the first dozen of episodes, Light and others spend so much time discussing about what they're doing, it's almost as if the show was intended for the blind.
Since he tricked this guy into touching the paper, he's the only other one on the bus who can see me.
In and of itself, it won't determine if Light is Kira. but I know Kira hates to lose.
In other words, if I write heart attack as the cause of death, then I should be able to write down all the details, including time of death afterwards, shouldn't I? This woman. If she'd spoken to the police before I met her. But it seems there's a god on my side after all.
Another element that seems troublesome to think about is the one true reason for all this. All the investigations, the time, the people he meet, and of course, the deaths that probably range in the thousands with the amount of names he wrote, all occur for one simple reason.
You're asking me why? I did it because I was bored.
Really? So boredom caused you to drop the Death Note and cause nothing but pure chaos to the world. Not sure if that's either the most reasonable or stupid excuse that I've ever heard. But then again, my guess would be just 5% on the latter. However, those are just minor issues that fail to cover up the series' full potential. Sorry, this cake is actually really good. That being said, this being able to stand greatly on its own would be a bit of an understatement. Well, by the way, do you want a piece of cake?
Death Note is a wonderfully crafted series that combines strong elements in order to tell the story of a boy who avoids all sorts of obstacles for his rise of power. It's like watching the most amazing chess game you will ever find, except there are many lives at stake and there are more than 2 people playing in one board. With great storytelling that is as complex as it is intense, high-quality animation, even by anime standards, a large cast of clever and memorable characters, and a good selected amount of thought-provoking themes enveloping the whole show, Death Note is absolutely one of those animes that are worth watching. It may have a bit of quirks, like explaining a bit too much of what's going on, but they can easily be forgivable for raising the standards of how smart an animated series can be. Of course, any anime fan will absolutely enjoy it, if they haven't seen it already. But it is also a good recommendation for anyone with a fascination with the power of death or the ideologies of God. From that perspective, they'll be having an amazing time just by analyzing Light Yagami and his behaviors that led him to think that he could be a god in a new world. If the series demands a rating, I would give this a solid 9 out of 10. With the traditional sort of approval, of course.
Normally, I would end things off from here, since I completed my job to analyze and critique the anime of Death Note. But there is something else that I must look into. The idea of the Death Note itself. What would happen if one does exist and someone would use it? The more that I think about it, combined with our modern society, the more that I realize that no one on this earth should ever own a Death Note.
For that, I have 2 fatal reasons. One is how it would be so easy to use to kill anybody the user wishes. The requirements in order to kill someone with the Death Note is by writing someone's name while thinking of their face. Thanks to social media like Facebook and Twitter, it is almost impossible to avoid getting your face be posted online and have someone recognize you for it. The simple ingredient to kill you can literally be one Google search away. In short, no one is safe from the Death Note. Secondly is because of how our society is completely consumed by the internet and pop culture. Now, let's say, hypothetically, that Light Yagami does exist. Of course, he would fill his Death Note with not just local criminals discussed in the news, but also the ones whose fame went viral and well-known psychopaths in politics, like George Zimmerman and Donald Trump respectively. However, due to how modern people, especially of Light's age, can be easily triggered by the smallest things, the user might end up killing someone for a rather unnecessarily foolish reason. It can be for a simple disagreement in a point of view of a social or political issue. It can be that a product like a movie or a game is not up to his or her quality standards. It can be the misrepresentation of a fictional character for a major motion picture. It can be over a little mistake that the victim didn't mean to do, say, or that the user misunderstood the victim. I wouldn't even be surprised if some of you watching would want to write my name in the Death Note simply because I've said that films like Frozen and Despicable Me are good, and that movies like Hotel Transylvania and Ratchet & Clank are bad. A simple disagreement about something like an animated film is not unusual for a reason for someone to react and strike. But if there is a fact that might frighten some, there have been people who actually have their own death note. Of course, there have been no deaths caused by writing a name, but there have been several accounts where students got suspended for holding a death note. However, they don't have the same mindset as Light by using it to kill off criminals for a better world. Instead, they fill their notebooks with names of their fellow students and the names of celebrities that are generally hated, like former President George W. Bush and Justin Bieber. So whoever gets the death note will most likely use it not for a sense of justice to the world, but rather for their own foolish personal agenda.
And this is only why nobody nowadays should use it. I believe I don't even have to mention how nobody has the high-level intelligence Light has in order to cover up their act from the police. But in a way, with the capabilities we have of our personal part of the internet, we had a little taste of writing on the death note. Whenever we would delete a spiteful comment, unfriend, unfollow, or block a person from our social media or YouTube account, it's like you're getting rid of that person from your perspective of your life. It certainly explains how one of the users of the death note would write each name and constantly say delete, delete, delete. Delete! Looking back, maybe it's not crazy to think of Ryuk and Light's reason to cause the earth-shattering event and creating Kira. The scariest message that this show has to offer is that the craziest things can happen from the simplest of boredoms.
Oh, and before I can fully conclude this, there is one more thing I would like to say. Once again, I would like to thank Heinrich Moen Nielsen for his amazing support on Patreon, which allowed him to get this review of Death Note. Now, technically, like the Death Note itself, it doesn't indicate that a specific person would be able to harness its power. In a way, anybody is able to do it. So, if you would like to support what I do and receive plenty of rewards at the same time, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. Now, if you excuse me, there is a shortcake in the fridge that I've written its name on the Death Note, so in 40 seconds it'll unfortunately die in my digestive system.
Well, Light, it's been interesting.